Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Motley Fool Conversations. I'm Motley Fool contributing stock analyst Rachel Warren, and I'm delighted to be joined on the show today by Steph Wagner, a nationally recognized authority on women's economic security and National Director of Women in Wealth at Northern Trust. Steph leads the firm's advisory practice for women and its Elevating Women platform. It's a national program focused on building financial literacy and helping women use their wealth to create meaningful impact in their families, businesses, and communities. Before joining Northern Trust, Steph spent years advising high net worth women navigating major life transitions, and she also built a national consulting practice for wealth management firms seeking to better serve female clients, and founded Women Wealthy Wise, a platform dedicated to advancing financial literacy and empowerment for women. In her new book, Fly, A Woman's Guide to Financial Freedom and Building a Life You Love, Steph gives women an empowering, tools-based approach to help achieve financial freedom and thrive for years to come. Steph, I'm really excited to talk with you today and discuss your book. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
I want to really set the table here for our conversation today. Your book starts with your own deeply personal story, a really pivotal series of moments in your life that led you to take control of your finances and create your own plan for success, and subsequently discover a real passion for educating and empowering women to take charge of their money. So maybe to start today, share with our audience your background, your story, and the journey that began, I think, as you put it in your book, your wake-up call to financial independence.
Yeah, thank you. I actually always loved finance. I loved math. I kind of went to college knowing I wanted to do this. I wanted to get in the world of finance, particularly corporate finance. And I started my career in investment banking and was really fortunate to get in this crazy world of private equity very young, pretty naive about it. Way back then, it was in its infancy. Certainly no women, I think, in the field. So consequently, I had no mentors, which became really important as I was navigating my career, my life. I got married, I started having children. And this was really the beginning of what eventually became my wake-up call, which was, the pressures that I think so many women feel as their careers are evolving, and then as your family life is tugging at you, especially in the world of finance. I actually had this moment where I was asked to get on a plane, a Cessna no less, to go and look at a deal in a very rural town of Alabama. I was 6 months pregnant. I had a 2-year-old at home, and my husband at the time traveled over 150 nights a year. And I just sat there and said, this isn't sustainable. Like, something has to give. And as I shared, I had no one to talk to. And I really saw it very black and white. I quit, literally, like the next day. And that wasn't really where I lost my financial independence. Yes, I lost my earning power in that moment, but I always thought I could get that back really quickly. I think what happened to me, which happens to so many people, is as couples were dividing and conquering, as we're navigating all the busyness, and I began to lean out of every aspect of my financial life. I'd met my ex-husband in college. We were both finance majors. He had a thriving career in finance. I'm like, you do it. I'm sick of this. And all that kind of worked until it didn't. And that didn't moment was when 14 years later, I learned that he'd been really living a double life, in love with another woman, having an affair, and wanted a divorce. And it was the beginning of, oh my God, what had I done? Like, I don't even know where I stand financially. I don't even know how I'm going to support these children, support myself. And I've put myself at tremendous risk, not just for today, but really for my future. And that was my wake-up call. If I love this stuff, if I had an aptitude for it, and I lost my financial autonomy, what is the average person, woman, doing that didn't learn this stuff, that never been exposed to it, and are suddenly navigating life and going, oh my gosh. And it doesn't have to be divorce. My catalyst was certainly divorce. It could be any major life event, right? Business failure, death of a spouse, anything.
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful story that you tell, and as you just laid out and go into more detail in your book, and it sort of spurred as well the beginning of this journey. You've spent years actively working with women across the nation to really reclaim and renew their financial power. I think something that as you said, really stemmed from your own story. So maybe tell me a bit more about the journey to writing your new book.
Yeah, when everything happened, I mean, my life literally blew up within a few hours of discovering all of this, right? Everything I thought wasn't. Everything I thought would be, would never be. And it was this, it was emotionally one of the most devastating things. Obviously, the financial aspect was huge. But as I began to navigate the emotions, I started to write. And this was 12, 13 years ago. I didn't know what I would do with it, but I knew I had a powerful story that a lot of women were navigating similar circumstances, and I wanted to do something good with it. I didn't know quite yet what. I was still finding my purpose. I was still trying to figure out how I was going to recreate myself and my career. But I knew I wanted to share this and do something good with it so it didn't take me down. I mean, that's the reality, right? We have a choice when we go through pivotal moments. We're either going to rise or we're going to let it take us down. And I knew I had 3 little boys watching me. I didn't have a choice, nor did I. It wasn't who I was. Well, I did also know that we have a real problem. If I'm struggling to regain my power, what is the average woman feeling? And at the core, it was financial literacy. So as I began to reinvent my career, I had developed some curriculum that to me was unique because it was women don't like to talk about money in general, right? It's been a taboo topic. So I wanted to strip that away and deliver an educational program that was empowering, tools-based approach, built confidence. You can't give someone confidence. They have to earn it. They have to grow it inside of them. And it was, again, not knowing what I was going to do with this book, but suddenly I had this aha moment as I began to get feedback on how transformative this curriculum was for so many women across the country. I thought, I think I'm onto something. If I combine this story and I combine this curriculum, which was truly the roadmap of how I rebuilt my financial life and frankly, my life. And I turned that into curriculum. It was my go-to step-by-step, but now I had delivered it so I could, help others. I think I might have something powerful. And it's been an amazing journey, for that to be 12 years ago and to now be today, here I am launching this book and getting the feedback. It's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And I'm really excited to get it out into the world and to see how it can help other people.
Yeah, I, for one, found it to be a really revelatory and really, really interesting work, and something that I, resonated a lot with as a woman in the financial field. And one of the excerpts that really stuck out to me was in chapter 4 of your book, Explore Your Relationship with Money. And I want to read an excerpt from it. You write, your relationship with money didn't just form overnight. It's been shaped by your experiences, your beliefs, the messages you've absorbed throughout your life. And understanding your past financial influences is key to recognizing why you interact with money the way you do today. So I want to dive into that. I mean, what are the questions we need to be asking to really understand the root of our relationship with money?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it was my first step, right? It was, how did I, who loved this stuff, abdicate, right?
Right.
Why? And why? When I was actually good at it. And it is the why from our behaviors that is so important, because if we create intentionality around it, we can change them, right? But it starts with self-awareness. So I think, for me, one of the things that I try to encourage women, or anyone really, it's not just women, but to think about is how they were raised. What messages did you receive that may have left an imprint on you that you never ever thought? Maybe you did the same. Maybe you did the opposite. I share stories within the book, my own personal experiences, as I saw things happening, behaviors that my parents had with money, messages that I received, all debt was bad. That was definitely the case, although that was in sharp contrast to the way my dad was acting. I thought my parents were financially secure, and then suddenly I learn, and I'm living this great life, and we have the big house behind gates and the country club and the fancy cars, and I'm thinking, okay, we're comfortable. And then suddenly my dad wins a car on a hole-in-one at a golf tournament and had to sell it to pay our taxes. And I was so confused. Like, wait a minute. I was taught this through your words, but your actions made me think a certain way. And then here we are. And that caused me, right, to be very nervous about this, to always feel like I didn't have that confidence to make good personal finance decisions. You know, another one too, I think is, it was very much a source of conflict and fighting within my family. You know, and I think that's important question to ask yourself. What were the dynamics about money as you were being raised? Did both your parents work on it, you know, and act like a true partnership around it? Or did one person handle everything? Was it a source of conflict? Was money even discussed, right? Did you receive words or even subliminally through actions of, you know, maybe my mom hid things in the trunk from my dad, again, because she didn't want fighting. All of that goes into your current behaviors. But it's not until we stop to say, why am I doing this? Like I said, that we can change course and really have a much better, healthier relationship with money, which is the very first step. You can know a lot, but you're not going to implement it if this isn't a comfortable experience for you.
Yeah. You know, something as well that you stress in the book is really that need for women to achieve financial literacy and autonomy. And that's never been, you know, more urgent. And something that I found really interesting was some of the statistics you named in the book. You know, you note at the beginning of your book that nearly half of women still defer financial planning to their partners. Nearly 50% of women aged 55 to 66 have no retirement savings. Right. And 54% of senior women cannot cover their basic needs. And, you know, something you also talked about, we're at a time where more than ever women are a part of the kind of so-called sandwich generation, right? Caring for children as well as aging loved ones while also providing financial support. So maybe talk about that a bit more, about how that financial autonomy impacts all aspects of life and how that can empower us as women to thrive through life's many changing chapters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I like to say this book is actually a women's empowerment book disguised as a finance book, because I don't think we're talking enough about this issue. If you're worried about how your bills are going to be paid, if you're worried that you're going to run out of money and be a burden to your family, if you're worried about, you know, living paycheck to paycheck and that stress that keeps you up at night, you don't have the ability to think big. You don't have the ability to dream. You don't have the ability to say, what brings me actual joy? And how might I actually figure out how to monetize that and build a career around it? And that was something that I had to sit in, you know, and I had to sit in that because as I was rebuilding, yes, I could have gone and gotten a job, right? I was in an emotional low. Going and punching a clock and doing something I hated was going to make me even feel worse. And so it became very much a focus of how do I find my purpose? Oh my God, such a pressurized word, right? Like, oh my, find your purpose. What the heck is that? But I knew if I found something that gave me joy, whether it was a job or I was building a business, I would begin to actually get excited about this new life. And I think to your point, we are living longer than ever. In fact, one thing to highlight is there is today, right, the average age of a woman who has means, who has the ability to create a healthy lifestyle, access to good medical care. We can expect to live into our 90s. Many of us are leaving the workforce, maybe in our mid-50s to 60s. That means decades of joy to create for ourselves. Retirement looks totally different now. Well, we have to be able to dream. We have to be able to set new goals. We have to be able to create a vision that we want for ourselves and get excited about it and make sure that we have the financial resources to help accomplish that. So I couldn't agree with you more that the intersection of financial autonomy builds so much more, you know, autonomy in our lives and choices and the ability to stay curious, open, and again, dream big. And that never ends. I think in some ways, for women in midlife where like my children are gone, you know, I don't have to worry about college and how I'm going to handle all of those expenses and all that. I can just start focusing on me. And it's a really amazing, powerful time, but you have to have financial autonomy to be able to do that.
You know, one of the things as well that I thought was really interesting, and obviously this applies to all of us, both men and women, but you talk about the importance of understanding your money mindset and your money personality, which I thought were really, really interesting kind of ways to frame these concepts. So maybe explain, what is a money mindset and what are the different kinds of money personalities?
Sure. Well, money mindset, right? I mean, it's like our mindset in life. We're either, operating in a growth mindset or a scarcity mindset or an abundance mindset is what I use in the book. Mm-hmm. And when you're living in fear, which obviously oftentimes when we don't have a handle on our money, we are operating out of fear. Well, no good decisions come out of fear. It also keeps us living small, right? We don't have the confidence to dream big. But when we're living in a world of abundance, right, where we think, wait, there's enough for everyone. I can continue to recreate. I believe in myself enough to invest in myself and monetize and grow my earning power. But what's really key is we have to also recognize that it's not just this idea of money is always there and circulating and we can always earn it. We've got to get the tools to be able to use our money to work for us. And that's part of being in a growth or abundance mindset too. So that's critical and those are things like ask yourself, right? If you're sitting here right now, wherever you are with your relationship with money, do you like to get in the game or are you more comfortable to sit on the sideline and watch other people? Well, that's the difference between abundance and scarcity, right? But how do you go and unleash your power if it's trapped inside of you in fear? And I remember a story, if I can share this, and it's not in the book actually, but I remember as I was building and I had hired my team, I got a new, I started to find who's going to manage what little wealth I had, honestly, out of this divorce. It wasn't much. In fact, I think I cashed in a lot of favors to have them take me on as a client. And I was trying to figure out what am I going to do to earn anything. I was so afraid. And this good friend who happened to take me on said, Steph, you got to stop. Like, you got to stop playing life small. You got to stop operating out of fear because that's Steph that got into private equity, that, tackled, raising kids the way she did early on in her career, all in. She's never going to come back. And you're too young, right? You've got too much opportunity in the world to take advantage of it. And it was a real moment of, you got a choice, and it was an intentional shift. But all of this goes to say, how do you live your life day to day with money? And that's where you get into the money personalities that you talk about. There are traits and behaviors that we, just without even knowing, whether we're a spender, a penny pincher, whether we're an avoider that says, you know what, I don't even want to know what I have. It's better to just bury my head in the sand. I don't even know what my accounts are. It just triggers anxiety. Or whether you're a trailblazer, right? We all know those trailblazers that are out creating wealth. Many of them are entrepreneurs, but they're also kind of that DIY, I know I can do this on my own, and that maybe it's not the best use of your time and talent. Maybe it serves you well to actually delegate. Oftentimes a trailblazer doesn't even stop to enjoy the roses, right? To say, wow, I've done this. Now I need to go and make sure I grow it and actually know how to manage, protect, and preserve my wealth. And maybe I'm not the best person. So we all have those. And I think every single money personality, and I lay it out in detail in the book, have good traits, strengths, and they have weaknesses. And until we stop and recognize our good behaviors from our bad, we can't purge what isn't working for us or what might be holding us back. But again, it's not about punishing ourselves or creating more shame around this. It's just about self-awareness, because once we're aware, we can make intentional shifts.
One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, and you assert this in your book as well, is that traditional budgeting often fails, and that there can actually be a much more empowering approach to managing and building, long-term financial security. So maybe you can dive into that a little bit more for me. What should financial empowerment look like in practice? Yes,
well, and it is centered. Empowerment is the key, right? And at the end of the day, my whole philosophy around this and financial literacy is about building confidence. It's about, inspiring, empowering, and getting rid of the number one things that holds women back when it comes to money, and that is shame. It is a deep-rooted shame inside us. We don't know enough, and we don't have enough. Maybe we have too much, and it's just too much responsibility. In my case, how did I let this happen to me? Shame holds us back. So if we're going to combat that, we've got to take a different approach. It's got to be something that really builds us up. And to your point, budgeting does exactly the opposite. Oftentimes we go, oh, I've got this budget. We don't even really know how we're doing until the end of the month or even several months, and we look back and say, I completely blew my budget. Oh my gosh, I had no idea how much. And it's a very disempowering feeling, and it almost makes you say, I give up. I don't even want to do this. Or we have no real understanding of what we're spending, and we set an unrealistic budget. We blow it. It's either going to come out of our savings or it's going to build that nasty credit card debt, and we get ourselves even more in a mess. So to your point, as you mentioned, I really love to take a proactive, really more of a framework approach, and it's called the 45-20-35 model. And it says after you do a deep dive and kind of look at where you are with relative to these, call them buckets, it allows you to make conscious, intentional shifts. So for example, no more, I'm going to repeat that. So it's this is the framework. No more than 45% of your net take home, right? The money that hits your bank account should be spent on those unavoidables. Now I break down unavoidables as the things to keep a roof over your head, your housing costs, your transportation costs. Typically that's going to be your car, your, anything that is related, car related. Your utilities is another one. And then insurance, kind of non-medical, because for most of us, medical is being taken out before our net income that's hitting our bank account. No more than 45% should be spent on that. Now, you've got to understand, and I think this is eye-opening for a lot of people, there's wants and needs embedded in that. So you can't just look at it and say, this is it, I need that. No, you want that. You might not need that big house or that big apartment or that doorman or whatever the case may be. So I always want to highlight that. But the next bucket is at least 20% should be invested in your future. Now, how you spend that money depends on your situation. Every single person's situation is different. And you have to ask yourself key questions. And there's priorities, obviously. You want to make sure you have an emergency fund or access. We were living in such a low interest rate environment that holding a bunch of cash, right, to cover your expenses may not be best, but you needed to make sure you had access to good debt. That's different topic, maybe a line of credit or something that, God forbid, there's an emergency, you don't have to rely on a credit card or sell any securities. So, now, obviously, interest rate environment's different. So you just got to make sure that if catastrophe happens, you can cover it. And I suggest, and it depends on, if there's two incomes in your household, a lot of different factors that I go into more detail. But do you have enough to cover 6 to 9 months of expenses? Do you have bad debt to pay off? I think a lot of people would be shocked to know how much bad debt keeps their net worth down, right? And so really getting strategic of how you're going to do both, save and get rid of bad debt is key. Are you saving enough for retirement? Do you need to diversify out of those non-taxable accounts and into more taxable accounts so that you can build wealth a different way than just something that's restricted in a retirement account? Maybe you want to think about real estate, as an investment, all those things, but it's all about investing in your future. Maybe you want to go back to school and you're saving for that because that can increase your income, which can turn around and increase the money that you save. Again, all building your future net worth. And the last part is the most empowering aspect of this, and it's thinking about your spending differently. It's that 35% is what I call your empowerment money. Inside of that are discretionary expenses like, things going out, having fun, spending on, shopping sprees, whatever the case may be, trips, whatever. But also there are unavoidables in there or not so avoidables like food. We need food. But do we need filet mignon every night? Or do we need to buy those organic, high cost, Are there options? Are there alternatives that we should be exploring? Again, going back to wants and needs, do we have to have a reality check? Do we have to make some adjustments to make sure that we stick within this framework? And I allow for flexibility within the framework because maybe you live in a place where you need more than 45%, but then you have to make a conscious decision to reduce your 35. Does that make sense? And so it's all about being proactive and knowing that you control this, and if you overspend, you got to make adjustments to that empowerment money to subsidize the difference so that you're not getting more and more in debt or sabotaging your ability to earn and save.
And that's a really good, I think, lead up as well into my next question. In chapter 5, Know Your Numbers, and this is what you were alluding to a lot in this last few moments. You were talking about getting organized with one's money, understanding your inflows and outflows. Mm-hmm. One of the things that stood out to me was the idea of thinking about your net worth and not just your income.
Yeah, I think too many people in this country, particularly young, people that are fresh out of college or early in their careers where their earning power is probably their biggest asset, right? They haven't yet built that wealth. As we age, our earning power becomes, while we might be high earners, we recognize that as we begin to get older, that's going to go away. And we've got to rely more on our other assets, not just our ability to earn. But when we're younger, there's so much conversation, there's so much pressure, there's so much focus on the dollars on our paycheck, the zeros and the commas. And we're not focusing enough on what we're doing with those dollars to build our net worth. And, that was something I grew up with and witnessed. My dad was a very high wage earner, yet we had nothing, right? I told that story. And so I think becoming much more intentional around what we do with our paycheck and how we allocate it and the opportunities that we're missing, because there's only 4 ways to build wealth, right? Invest the money you earn, let the money keep growing, don't take it out, pay down bad debt, right? And I mean, there's not a lot of choices, or earn more to invest more. So, again, we can't be so short-sighted. We have to. And I think it goes into, we have to really learn how money works and how it grows to really appreciate its earning power. If we do our part, it can actually begin to earn more than most of us in America will ever earn, in our lifetime on an annualized basis. But we have to let it happen.
I like that point you make about investing your money and let it grow. That's obviously something you'll hear at the Fool. Our audience are a lot of retail investors, and so that's something we talk about a lot. And in your book, you also talk about the importance of compounding and diversification. And this obviously is a very important investment concept. It also goes back to that point you stress of really building habits to incorporate into daily life. But maybe talk about that a little bit more and what that planning and strategizing should look like.
Well, and I think there's a lot of talk on the investment, like your investment portfolio diversification, right? And that's what I've tried to do with this book is if you notice, I don't really talk about the stocks to buy, how to buy a stock, I don't. This is trying to address all the things that we should be doing to help that happen later, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done that we're not doing, I think, in this country. And I'm trying to build awareness around it and give people the tools to do it. So when we talk about compounding and diversification, I'm really talking about looking at your entire balance sheet, right? And looking at the power of when we say no to something and yes to saving, or yes to what is the opportunity cost of those decisions. And all of that means, well, what can I do with my money instead, right? If I'm not going to spend it or I'm going to keep it in cash, what could I actually do with it if I unleashed it and let it work? And that's where we get into this powerful thing called compounding, right? And I don't think people are aware that, if we think about the average annual rate of return of 7%, right? Money doubles every 10 years if we let it. And, I don't just pull the 7% out of the sky. Like that's the average over historical return of the S&P, over like a 40-year period. Right. And it's a pretty conservative number to use if we're talking about long-term investing. But people don't, they think the math is too complicated to figure out. And really, the 72 rule, right, allows you to play around with that and say, okay, let's look at how quickly money can double through compounding at different interest rates. And then you can sit there and go, all right, well, this helps me actually make more informed decisions with the type of things I'm investing in, which also then goes into what you mentioned, the importance of diversifying. Because if we're putting it all in one place, whether maybe it's a liquid, maybe because it's a retirement account or it's real estate or investing in a business, you can't access that, right? And that can put you, even if you have a lot of wealth built up in that can put you at risk if you have an emergency and can't access anything. So there is this importance of diversification and not putting all your eggs in one basket. And I think oftentimes we stick to what we're comfortable with. And instead of really stretching and learning and looking at the opportunity cost of living in that comfort zone, maybe we need to diversify. But again, I just want to reinforce when we are talking about this, it's looking at someone's entire balance sheet. Right. And I like to say, trying to put a strategic, get all the spokes of the wheel moving so that together they're helping to build your net worth and helping your advisors or wherever you're going, to invest that money either on your own or whatever platform you're using to be working much more effectively so that you're not sabotaging it.
Yeah, I like that concept of taking a much more holistic, kind of full approach when looking at the elements of compounding and diversification. I think that's a really important point you make. One of the things as well that really stuck out to me, and this resonated with me as well, you talk about in your book how many women lack confidence in their financial lives. And I'm curious, what do you see as being some of the most significant barriers that prevent women from becoming, financially empowered, or people from becoming financially empowered, more generally as well?
Yeah. Well, number one, we're not learning this stuff early enough. And we're not giving ourselves or putting ourselves in a position to learn where there's relatively low risk. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to talk about this concept of poker. There's a reason being, I had the good fortune of collaborating with an amazing organization called Poker Power. And it was Jenny Just had this revelation of like, wait, why are my boys so strategic and taking risks and thinking about things a certain way? And why is not my daughter? And, I think there's a great story behind this, and I'm just going to touch on it because I do think it answers your question well, is her husband in passing said, well, because she's not learning poker. She's like, what do you mean? Well, these young men are learning at a very young age with fake money, to be strategic, to take risks, to think differently. And there's not a lot to lose, right? They're doing it, and every time they do it, and every time they win again with fake money, it's building confidence in their decision making. It's fascinating, right? And I was like, so if you take that, girls aren't learning poker and other things. I mean, there's other examples, not just poker, right? I think there's even in sports on the field and team, there's taking risks when you see the gain or the loss where it doesn't catastrophically change your life. I think, unfortunately, we're not learning it. And so most of the time we're learning in times like me, what I experienced, where my life blew up. I couldn't afford to take major risks. Fortunately, I had the skills and I could rely on my education and my background to say, wait, Steph, you know this stuff. You just have to change and understand it's a different vocabulary, but you already know this stuff. That's something that not every woman has. So I think the answer is we've got to change that with the rising generation. I think we, as the older generation of women, need to share our stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, our successes, our failures. And we need to learn, but at the same time, let's invite the younger generation to learn alongside of us. And it's not just for girls. I have 3 boys. And if we really want change, this has to be a joint conversation. I remember my son, who's now 28, saying, and his girlfriend is amazing, and she's in the world of finance, and he said, yeah, I'm going to go help her buy a car. And I said, don't you dare. You can go along and support and sit there and help look at like features and all that, but don't rob her of this learning opportunity, because I know you're going to jump in. It's in your nature. You're going to want to help, and I commend you for that. but you're going to rob her of an incredible experience that will help her buy a house, that will help her invest, that will help. So, it's building blocks. We have to recognize them and embrace them and lean in and not rob the next generation of them.
Well, towards the end of your book in chapter 7, you talk about how to be smart with your love life when it comes to money, which I thought was a particularly interesting chapter. And it includes some very practical steps to take, right, to ensure financial strength and autonomy. But maybe walk us through that methodology a little bit.
Yeah, you're speaking kind of my own, like sitting back and going, what part did I have in this, right? In my own marriage and then going forward. Yeah, it's actually my favorite chapter too. There we go. Yeah, I didn't think it would be as I started writing it. At the end, I'm like, wow, this is my favorite chapter. I think what you're alluding to is I took a step back, especially as I grew, through the years and entered into new relationships and really thought, what was my part in all this, right? And owned it. I think that's the key. My ex-husband didn't say, you need to quit your job, right? I did that. He supported it. Again, this isn't a book about, should you stay home or should you not? Everybody should make that decision. But I remember during the recession, and I think, if you remember from the book, I reflected back on, here's this man walking, at 4:00 in the morning, so stressed because our retirement accounts were, obviously just being pummeled. But also he worked in the financial services industry, so he had so much fear about losing his job. I didn't understand why he was so stressed because I was too busy doing carpool and all that other stuff, right? And I thought it was interesting is not once did he ask for help, but not once did I offer it. And I think it was an aha moment of, times have changed. We no longer live in the 1950s where it was clearly, the breadwinner and the homemaker, we don't have that really anymore. In fact, back then, I think it was 65% of families. Today, that's only 20. And yet statistics show 65% of men still say they dominate all this. They handle the overwhelming majority. Well, that is a broken system. That must change, right? And so what I try to lay out in chapter 10 is more of a approach to thinking about this in marriage as more of a partnership in all aspects of our lives with real, I think, practical tools of even if there is an imbalance of knowledge, there still may be a balance of interest that we can divide and conquer up things within our financial lives so that both parties are involved. And you don't both have to be experts, but you have to have transparency. You have to have conversation. You have to have respect for the other person's opinion. And you also have to have awareness about what the goals of the family is and make sure that everyone's swimming up the stream in the same way and they're not, creating these headwinds that are going to sabotage inadvertently. I don't think anyone's doing it intentionally. So I try to really lay out kind of practical tools that partnerships can take, to, whether you're married or not, to build, a healthier partnership around money, which we all know bleeds into a healthier relationship in general. But also times are changing. There's more people today that are single than ever before, that have no desire to get married or, even are starting to view what their partnerships might look like differently. And it's an invitation to break away from this narrative of, marriage is the end game. And, it's like, wait, if you're going to work so hard to build financial autonomy, how do you have a healthier outlook on life with your relationship, married or not, even when you're dating? So, this book is really intended to be for everyone, whether you're in your 20s or 60s, married or single. And so I try to offer in that chapter a little bit of everything, but a lot of perspective to think about, what beliefs and scripts have we been given throughout our lives that just don't simply work anymore for us. And we need to rewrite it and understand that we have the power to live how we want to live. And frankly, when you have financial autonomy and you know how you're going to pay your bills, it opens up a lot of opportunities in your love life.
I think those are really, really valuable points you make. As we come to the end of our discussion today, maybe one more question for you. If there's someone listening that's thinking, I really want to start my journey towards financial empowerment and financial freedom, I'm not exactly sure where to begin. What are kind of some practical initial steps that one could take?
Yeah. Well, first of all, understand this isn't as hard as it looks, right? And so getting, and recognizing where you're at and being okay with it. Don't having shame around it. And that's what I try to accomplish in those first few chapters of if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone, right? So acknowledging just wanting to take that first step is pat yourself on the back, right? It's also small steps lead to big rewards. No one's asking you to learn all this in a day, right? These are little baby steps. But I do think and that the most important thing is to acknowledge where you are emotionally and to really start with understanding your current relationship with money, where you've been, why you have this relationship, and where do you want to go? What are the goals that you want to have? What's the vision that you have for your future? Because if you do, it will start to inspire and ignite a flame in you that will want you to continue on this journey versus give up, because the next step you have to do is really take a hard look at your financial reality, and that can be kind of painful. But if you have a goal of where you want to go, then it helps you say, okay, well, there's a reason why I'm going through all this work, because I'm not going to get to accomplish that goal unless I do it. So if you start without that, it's really easy to just, fall off that diet really fast.
Yeah, I think there's so many practical tools that are contained within your book, and also just in the conversation we've had today. I know I have found it to be a really educational, delightful experience. For those who are viewing or listening, check out Steph's new book, Fly: A Woman's Guide to Financial Freedom and Building a Life You Love. Steph, it's been a delight to speak with you today. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity and the great work that you and Motley Fool are doing.
Thanks so much.